Replacing the rudder on a Fenn Mako XT surfski. Part 4. The access cover plates. When I rescued this XT, the rudder was gone along with the access cover plate. I suspect it had been secured with self-tapping screws, but the holes were butchered, and I've never been comfortable with using self-tappers on such thin substrate without substantial backing. Also, after cutting the rear access hole, I discovered that the adhesive fixing the cable tubes to the rudder well had come adrift, and it would be very difficult to reattach them. So, as explained in Part 3, 2 access holes were cut. Now time to close them up. Number 1. The rear cover plate. If you look closely at the second video in the introduction, you will notice that the rudder bar and cable attachment are on the outside of the deck. The cables are fed from the pedals into the body of the ski and re-emerge via a plastic tube fixed into angled blocks on the deck. For the XT, I have chosen to place the angled blocks on the underside of a cover plate made from thin veneer and moulded to fit the curve of the deck. The blocks are drilled at shallow angles to create the holes for the cable tubes, which emerge onto the deck roughly level with and pointed towards the rudder bar. The blocks are fixed to the underside of the cover plate with epoxy resin. When the cover plate is complete, the location of holes for screws is marked onto a cardboard template, which is then used as a guide for drilling the holes in the panel. Then the panel is fixed temporarily over the rear hole and in turn is used as a guide to drill the holes in the ski deck. The underside of the deck is sanded to remove burrs from drilling and to create a clean surface for the next step. As I mentioned earlier, I don't think that a 1.5mm fiberglass skin will provide sufficient grip for any screw, so beneath each hole I epoxy a small wooden block to act as a backing plate with sufficient depth to anchor each screw. 2. The seat cover plate. This was made and fixed in the same way as the rear cover plate. A small circular panel was cut from a flat sheet of veneer and holes drilled to accommodate the screws. As before, small blocks were epoxied to the underside of the deck to anchor the screws. Number 3. The rudder cover plate. After the curved panel had been cured and cut to size, a hole was drilled to accommodate the rudder sleeve. Then holes for screws were marked and drilled and backing blocks epoxied to the underside.